All right, let's move on. So,
Yes, let's move on.
all right. So homosexuality in the wake of the sexual revolution. I'm going to very, very fast. I'm not going to talk about, there's a book that came out in 1989. It's called After the Ball, How America Will Conquer Its Fear and Hatred of Gays in the 90s. It was written by two gay men, Marshall Kirk, who was a neuropsychologist, and Hunter Madsen was a social marketing and advertising executive. So look at the, two fields here, a neuropsychologist and a marketing and advertising executive, and they were both Harvard trained. And they basically put together a plan. I'm not saying their one book is the whole reason why things are the way they are, but in 1989, they came out with basically a manifesto. How are we going to get America, and by extension, the rest of at least the Western world, because America is, of course, the peak of its power at that time, right? To basically overcome its rejection of homosexuality and so on and so forth. It's a very fascinating read. It's also a maddening read, I think, if you're a religious believer, because you see that they basically put a plan which was implemented like lockstep and barrel. Everything they said came to be done. And they actually said, this is quoting from the book. This is their own words. They say, the campaign we outline in this book, though complex, depends centrally upon a program of unabashed propaganda. These are their words. Firmly grounded in long-established principles of psychology and advertising. And these are Harvard-educated psychologists and advertising executives. And, one thing they say, one major aspect of this pillar is desensitization. The principle of desensitization builds on people's primal instincts, whereby a flood of gay-related advertising presented in the least offensive fashion possible gets the job done. And then they say, if straights can't shut off the shower, they may at least eventually get used to being wet. Right. So this was all very intentional. And then they also say, they talk about conversion, and they say, we mean conversion. Now look at that. Again, straight quote from the book. We mean conversion of the average American's emotions, mind, and will through a planned psychological attack in the form of propaganda fed to the nation via the media.
Wow, it's amazing quotes. Actually, it could have come straight from hell. There's a deliberate attempt to subvert, undermine traditional.
Deliberate,
quite intentional. You stressed several times they were Harvard educated, so they had the intelligence to promote this, and you say they were very successful.
Right. And I just want to, I want people to also just realize that, again, we should not just naively take the situation that exists around us as just, oh, well, that's what it is, right? Like many Muslims who kind of just parrot what they hear, especially in Western societies, and parrot the discourse and all. It's like, do you realize that your discourse and your entire moral sensibility has literally been crafted by people with a very particular, intention to craft it in a very particular way, right? I'm not saying the whole thing is just these two men, right? But like what they said, and if you read the book, they say, again, they themselves say there are all of these kind of dysfunctionalities about the gay community, and they critique it themselves. They have like 10 points about all of these things, and they say we're not going to show that to the public. They say when you bring, like you're sitting in a tent and you bring the horses, you let the front and you don't let the stinky back in, you leave the stinky.
One of the things that are obvious is something that Sheikh Hamza Yusuf has mentioned is that the anal intercourse, which is the staple diet of this, is extremely dangerous practice, and it's an excellent way to transmit disease as well.
As we learned in the 1980s.
And so this current emphasis on public health and so on, advertising against smoking and so on is all very good, of course, but this one practice gets away scot-free, even though it's an excellent way to spread disease, obviously AIDS, the virus, and other means. So but that's not highlighted or mentioned. That's overlooked completely. So.